right? There's no political agenda here. There's nothing political correct here, because what they're doing to our children is not correct.
Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
The adults that get paid as public servants, who took an oath, who said, I will make sure your babies are educated, I will make sure your kids are nurtured in the classrooms. That's what they said on paper. But in real time, our babies are coming home crying. Our babies are looking to us as their parents to make sure they are protected. And the problem is, the law says we must send them. Right? The Constitution says our children are entitled to a free and appropriate education. But nothing in it that says that you have the right to put your hands on my baby. Nothing says you have the right to drag my baby, to sexually assault them, to deny them a quality education. Because if we were handling our business, some of this wouldn't be happening to children. This is not about the blame game. We're not doing this today. It's not about mission statements. It's not about your ideologies. It's about what are we going to do to support all children in Connecticut. And let us be very clear, what's happening in Connecticut is happening across the country. But I'm encouraged by our experts to help lend solutions to improve the lives of Connecticut children. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kiana. She'll introduce herself, and I'm even hoping I'm saying her name right. People let me say their name wrong, and let me say it, y'all, on the mic. And so I'll let her introduce herself. Thank you so much. If you need us, we're here. Remember, we are family. Sister Slaves are.
Good morning. My name is Kiana Wincoop. I've worked in education for 18 years, and I now currently work through the Department of DDS, which is Department of Developmental Services through the state of Connecticut. I am the proud mother of 2 sons. I grew up in West Hartford, and I've been living in Hartford for the past 20 years. I have an 11-year-old son, Najee, and just turned 8-year-old son, Naz. They both have experienced racial tension at their school. My older son, Najee's been attending this school since 2nd grade. Najee chose to leave the district and start his first year of middle school in the 6th grade at another school. Fortunately, Najee was accepted. My younger son, Naz, was not, started experiencing racial tension at the same school at just 4 years old, and was traumatized due to bullying and racial tension. Through the years, which caused him to miss 51 days of school. Both children have undergone intense therapy through. The bullying was so bad that my little 7-year-old at the time refused to go to school, causing him anxiety that was so bad that became a medical concern. My younger son has been diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Unfortunately, through the years, both children have had horrible experiences dealing with multiple racial comments and behaviors from teachers, staff, and children at the school. Naz cried and said that he has no friends and didn't want to go to school anymore. My children fear for their safety. At that point, my children and I were really concerned and frustrated with all the racial tension and some incidents that occurred, which were Najee's 5th grade teacher told him that black was a scary color and white was nice and pure. Najee also had been given a book in 3rd grade that made the black character out to be the liar. Unfortunately, in 2nd grade, Najee was also blacked out of his class picture and laughed at by his peers and told that all we can see is your bright eyes and your name tag. My younger son Naz has been experiencing children not wanting to play with him, and there have also been an incident where a child told him, ha ha ha, you are so black, and ran away from him on the playground, leaving him on the buddy bench to feel isolated and mentally and emotionally distressed. Both my children have always been afraid to tell and feel like if they tell an adult at the school, they will be a snitch or considered a troublemaker and receive a consequence. It is imperative at this point that we come to some understanding of how to go forward and provide resources for the children and family. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have people still coming in and they're calling me, and I'm going to work it out. So again, let's be family today. If y'all looking for a formal conference, this is not it, okay? So we have one of our city councilors. So the reason why I wanted to share her story, then I'm going to introduce you. Dean Arrington is from the college, is here. So I'll be bringing her up next. But I thought it was important for her to share the story because for some reason we think race, that we've arrived with the president, former President Barack Obama, and we haven't. For a child to have to miss 50-something days of school at the age of 8 because adults couldn't figure it out, right? Adults couldn't figure it out. Our children don't vote yet. They don't sign contracts, and they don't hire and fire. They can't choose their parents. They don't choose the homes they're in. We got to do better. So again, it's not about blaming anyone. This is just the reality that we're going to address. So at this time, I would like to have Dean Arrington come up and welcome us to her awesome college. She's the Dean for Student Services. Thank you so much, ma'am. Join us on your mic, okay? Your mic.
I love your enthusiasm.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to Capital Community College, the first best college in New England for adult learners and the 10th best national community college in America. We're so proud to have the honor. It was a surprise to us. And every day we're here transforming lives. So we're happy to have you be part of it. And I was delighted when I was contacted about hosting this event at Capital Community College. And last year I was at the legislature as part of the parents event, and I was on one of the panels that spoke to higher education and what are some of the things that prevent us. But one of the things that I do know is that parents make a difference. Parents make a huge difference in their children's education. And I come from inner city Bridgeport, and I had a lot of siblings, and my parents were not college educated, but they knew the importance of education from the very beginning. And we were held accountable, and the schools were held accountable. And we knew we better not act up in school because our parents would be there to get us straight right in front of everybody. But if the teacher or anybody else didn't act right, my parents would also be at school. So while my parents never went to college, they sent 6 children to college. And it was always planted in our head that we would go to school and do what we were supposed to do and do well, and somehow we would go to college. And so that did in fact come to fruition. And I hear that story many times, and at Capital we also have generations of students. Sometimes it's mothers and sons and fathers and daughters or 2 siblings, but it tends to be a generational college, so that when one student comes to college and, one member of the family, then the others do. The other thing is that I ran into a woman last week, and she was saying, "Do you remember me?" And I vaguely did. When she started speaking to me, her face was recognizable, but I couldn't think of her name. But then she started telling me her story about how she had come to Capital, and that was her start, and she was intimidated when she first came, and she started around 30 years old, and she had gone on down to earn a master's degree. So it's just the beginning of loving higher education and learning higher education, learning about higher education. So, and like I said, when I looked at the research, and after the conversation we had last week or so, I was looking at the Chronicle of Higher Education, and there was this story about parents and the impact that they have on their children and being successful in school. So certainly parent engagement and what we do and the examples we set, make a difference. So I encourage you to, like I said, hold your children accountable, hold the teachers accountable, and everybody else, because we know that we still have struggles. I love the title of the symposium. I think it speaks to, if we thought we had arrived in America, no, there's still, the struggle continues every day. And so we have to struggle with the powers that would not have us be educated, because a lot of people don't want to see Black and brown people educated. So I encourage you again to, enjoy your day, make the best of it, and if there's anything we can do for you at Capitol, just let us know, and we'll be happy to accommodate you. That's what's it.
Phil, thank you so much, man. Yes. So I think it's important to know that when we reached out to Capitol, because when they told us how much it costs, I'm like, look, they said you have not because you ask not, so let me ask. So we asked would they donate the service, and so they donated the space. We're talking at the last minute because we were trying to figure out the more centralized place to do that. So I thank you for even being so accommodating, because some reason when it comes to parents, they think we're not capable of even putting on an event. So it's very intentional that this is parent-led. It's very intentional. And if we're going to improve the lives of children, we know we will need to be intentional. With that being said, I am honored to introduce our next guest. Look, Mr. Shumate, people were talking about you already, okay? When I said that who I was bringing in, I know him, the Miss Teresa said, I know him from the National Urban League. And then Indianapolis Urban League said, yes, we know him. So it looks like we got somebody in the house that I am glad to have, because if they didn't say anything about you, it'd been like, thank you, but no thank you. You don't play. I don't play when it comes to my babies. So I'd like to introduce, he can introduce himself, because I figure we're personal enough, family enough that we can share with each other. So I'd like to introduce the Vice President of the University of Oklahoma, specializing in diversity, Mr. Jabar Shumate.
Are we good here? Can you all hear me? Okay, good. I'm gonna put on my timer, because Ms. Gwen said just keep in mind what Liz Taylor told her last husband, and that is I won't keep you long. I'll be very, very brief. But I really thank you all for being here this morning. A little bit about me. I had a chance before now, I'm serving as Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Oklahoma, to work and do the work that many of you all in this room do every day. I had a chance in Oklahoma to serve in the Oklahoma State House and State Senate. And I will tell you that though I had an opportunity to live out a dream and serve in elected office, what sustained me, especially me in Oklahoma, someone who looks like me in Oklahoma, in the Oklahoma legislature, with people like Ms. Gwen. Let's give her a round of applause for all that she does to make it happen for young people and for young families. I want to say to the Connecticut Parents Union, which empowers parents and gives parents a voice in the role of seeing great possibilities for our young people. The greatest ingredient that we have is parents. The most powerful group we have is parents. And that is why you will see so many individual forces in education trying to suppress our parents. So this is a timely conversation, because it is time for us as a community to wake up and understand that the quality education that we deserve, that we want to see, starts with the parents being empowered to be the advocates and being the folks that lead the political process, people like myself. And so I applaud this organization for empowering the most powerful entity in the role of getting our kids a great education, parents. It is indeed an outstanding cause. Let's give parents across the room a a round of applause. I really like your title. And when I think about the perils and promises of Black, Latino, and poor children, I think that the greatest ingredient that we have in terms of the promises absolutely are our children. When I was in the legislature, what empowered me to take the road of supporting, whether it was folks fighting for greater educational options, folks fighting for more funding for their schools, was the fact that all of the folks talking about public education or talking about education, how to improve education, seem to always forget to talk about our children.
That's right.
And our children represents the promise, the possibilities of what can happen. So I listened, and Ms. Gwen said this morning on the bus that she goes around this state offering children books. She picked us up in a wonderful, I call it a limousine, I think I was, but it had books on it. And she said, because everybody knows that you ain't free if you can't even read your freedom papers. And the truth of the matter is, unless our children are able to develop what I say are those talents that are so unique to them individually, and that starts with being able to be not only a great reader, but understanding that that's the first step, because we know if you can't read, you can't do math, you can't do science, you can't perform the way you need to perform. And so I think that the power of this conversation really starts with our children. And I would say that some of the individuals that go into how we determine what our educational system is going to look like often present the greatest obstacles, because they don't have a mindset of understanding that the focus should be on our children.
I'm sorry, is there another mic on up there that was saying they're telling me to do some trial and error? Is that one off? Is that off?
This one's
Some
off,
things it is.
but we can turn.
So you want?
How's this? No? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Great, because see, I figured that some folks don't want me to say what I have to say this morning, so. And Ms. Gwen, and Ms. Gwen, I'm rolling back 2 more minutes on my time. No. But I would say that one of the most interesting things is that the perils become individuals who are in this educational system that don't think about children. So we were talking coming over here, and I remember when I ran for office, and the son of a public educator my mom taught for 30 years. When I got into the legislature at 28 years old and saw that there were schools in my community that were almost nearly arresting parents at the front door because they would come to the school asking about the welfare of their child, refusing to have a discussion with them and saying to them, I know what's best for you. Actually saying that parents couldn't be empowered to be in the process because there's no way they could understand the process. I knew that though those groups were folks who traditionally put people like me in the office, we had problems. And I took the approach of understanding that children were more important than me getting reelected. And that if we were gonna get somewhere in Oklahoma, we were gonna do that by understanding that organizations will have to plan with us and not for us. And so when I think about some of the perils, it's individuals who wanna do good, but already know how to do good, already decided what the plan is to do good, and also sees parents as obstacles to doing good. And you've all been there. When I came up this morning, we were talking about how we get more folks who look like us in the classroom. Because we know that young people, if they can see individuals that look like them, then they can be that. But all too often we have a system that doesn't work to see, doesn't understand how we could work together to see more individuals who actually are connected to communities because they come from those communities and look like the people in those communities. And actually, we know for sure that if we can keep a teacher in a classroom, a principal in a building for longer than 2 years, then we have the opportunity to achieve some success. They become obstacles to the challenges. Politicians like myself who refuse to understand that when you go to the state capitol, it's not wise to get amnesia and lockjaw. They don't work well at the same time because you forget where you come from and who put you in office. So all too often listening to special interests who don't have an understanding about your community. We have some work to do in that area. When I think about our community, far too few Miss Gwens, far too few individuals who are willing to say that I have a responsibility to educate other parents and help them understand that the system itself belongs to them. So I think that those become some of the greatest issues that affect, some of the perils that affect our young people in school. When I think about what has happened here in Connecticut, and it's all tied together. When you see kids from preschool to second grade being 3 times more likely to be suspended.
Babies.
Suspended. Because we have an individual who's teaching them, who doesn't look like them, who doesn't understand them. And Ms. Gwen could get that same child to sit at that table and perform the way they need to perform, but we take the road of suspending them. That's a system created not to protect, not to help, but it's a system all too often that protects those individuals and entities within that system. And I don't have any problems saying, as a son of an educator, I want to see teachers be successful, but teachers have to understand that they're there to educate children. I want to see superintendents be successful, but I care more about the children than their retirement. I want to see individuals throughout the system thrive, but if our children aren't thriving, we have an alarm at the gate and we have work to do. So I think that that becomes an issue. When you look at funding in today's time, the disparities that exist, Connecticut is a story of the haves and the have-nots. And the fact that you have to go to court to demonstrate equitable funding, it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that those young people trapped in systems of failing schools, in cycles of poverty, deserve more attention than someone whose high school is near Yale. Ray Charles can see that. It should be hard. But I think that one of the things that we have to do in this situation is understand that these all go back to understanding our children. And when we look at graduation rates, in today's time, I work in higher education, and thank you so much for opening the doors of this school. But I exist even at a school where individuals graduate from our public school systems within the state of Oklahoma, which has a horrible public education system by any way you want to measure it. And I exist at a school where 46% of the students come from out of state. 73% of those who are black and brown come from out of state. And if you're from Oklahoma, you're not supposed to say they come from Texas. And the only thing we're supposed to say when we say Texas is beat Texas. But actually, we have a system set up where public schools, public education, and I'm so grateful for community colleges. Because if it wasn't for community college, let's give this community college a round of applause, actually. If it wasn't for community colleges, many of our young folks wouldn't develop the skills to do the things necessary to be at some of the universities that are our leading institutions in the country. I was one who did not have, in my public education experience as the son of an educator, a great background in math and science, and was a community college. It was an African-American lady at the University of Oklahoma who said, I'm gonna send you to a community college in the area. That's where you're gonna take this and this, and I gained the confidence necessary to believe I could do the things. And I really do believe whatever community you're in, support that community college. Because oftentimes, it is the place where the lights get turned on for our young people. So I wanna say, there are some things that are very important for us to do, but they do evolve around taking our system back. And so I'm great with mobilizing, but I'm gonna tell you that power concedes nothing without demand. And you can have either organized money or organized people. I applaud you, Ms. Gwen, because you've organized people. And we gotta continue to support organizations like this one. But I'm gonna tell you as a former politician, the greatest threat out there are individuals who are engaged enough to say that I will run for school board. I will run for city council. I will run for the legislature. I will run even if some of those offices are not imaginable. The way in which you continue to keep at the forefront those issues that affect the disparities that exist in education, those issues that affect the fact that we have systematic poverty involved in education, is to keep your issue at the forefront. And I think there is no greater challenge than to find yourself on a school board in this room, crafting those policies that open up opportunity and that allow parents to be engaged and mobilized. So I know that a lot of folks say, I don't have the resources, but I'm gonna tell you, in most situations, if you look throughout the state of Connecticut and you look at school board races, I bet it's not very different from Oklahoma, that a handful of votes will put you on a school board. And so I'm a big advocate for saying, not just challenge policymakers, become policymakers and let folks know we can be for you or we can be against you. And I tell you this, I think the greatest thing that you could do, Ms. Gwen, as well, is get parents to understand that we work for them, and that we demand the kind of respect that they must be listened to, paid attention to, and as well, we need parents across this forum and other places to understand we need you in the process, because you really are where the rubber meets the road. I think that it is very, very important to continue to do what you're doing in mobilizing your efforts, in showing that you will move educated parents about the system into state capitals, into school buildings, before the news. I just had a chance to leave Memphis, Tennessee, and meet with Miss Carpenter, Miss Sarah, at Memphis Lift. And she had me, Memphis Lift is an organization very similar to the work that Ms. Gwen is doing here, but they have now trained so many individuals in the city of Memphis that those folks are so empowered, they will go to a school board member's house, knock on the door, and demand that they be heard. And as a public official, you're not free from that. And I say that we have got to continue to try to mobilize our parents to understand that politicians work for you. I'm a big believer as well that we must expand educational options for our students. The reason why, if you look around the world and people come from around the world to attend our higher education systems, is because largely we are universities and systems that compete. We compete for students, we compete for professors, we compete for research dollars, we compete. And that competition drives universities forward and up. And I will say that I believe that the system to educate our kids is the public education system. But until we, again, challenge that system to say, if you are not gonna listen to our parents, if you're not gonna focus on our children, and if systems are gonna be designed to take care of everybody else but kids, we will find other ways to educate our students. I think that it is important and vitally important that we look in this state at options in areas where we've been hard pressed to see reform and change for other options to educate our kids. I will tell you, I grew up not understanding what a charter school was, and I certainly, voucher was a bad word in my household, still is today. But I will tell you this, I helped to sponsor when I was in the legislature a bill that allowed those students who are on an IEP or face some kind of disability the option to use a voucher, and I'll tell you why. I saw the mean side of the educational system when I had a nephew who had autism. Now, my mother's taught for 30 years. My family, I come from a family of educators. And to see how the system would do everything that they could not to provide the paraprofessionals needed, not to provide the services needed, not to provide the counseling and support services needed. And these were funds that they had because they were already receiving funds from the federal government to do this work. I became very cognizant that when we are not mobilized and organized as a community to challenge the system will run over those who are marginalized, who are the most left behind, who the system doesn't think has the loudest voice. And one of the things that we saw, because we developed actually the first voucher program for students with disabilities, or students on an individual, on an IEP, signed in office by a governor who was a Democrat, because he had a daughter who died, but she had special needs. And he could understand, he lived the experiences of what the system would do to individuals that they felt like weren't going to rise up. He remembers those experiences when he was not governor and just from a small town in Oklahoma and deprived from those opportunities. And we worked together to show the district that if you weren't gonna service our kids, then we were gonna find other options. You know what happened? Our public education system began doing everything that it could to shift resources to make sure that they never lost another kid. And I'm gonna tell you, our program is not one of the most expanded programs in the nation because the district responded, because they saw what happens when a few people decide to get together and organize and fight on behalf of those who are marginalized. So I know that you have a lot of speakers and you got a great panel coming before you today. But I want you to remember something, that if for nothing else, support in every way that you can the movement of giving our parents the tools that they need, like this wonderful parent who offered her story today. And I'm gonna say, give her a round, because it took courage. I know you were like, I don't hurry up and speak. But it is the effort of individuals like this parent here that get the attention of policymakers like myself, and we can never not underestimate the power of giving that parent the tools to make her government do what it's supposed to do by our kids. So I like to close and say that the eyes of the future look upon us, and pray that we see beyond our own time, and for our kids, continue to see beyond your own time. Thank you so much.
We're moving along, we're very intimate. I do want to give the opportunity as we transition into our panel, if we had any questions. Because we are capturing this information, we will be scribing it, because we want to capture all of our input together, and we will be presenting solutions from the audience, from each other. We are family today, and every day, to present to our State Department of Education, as well as lawmakers, to come up with solutions. So that I want to be very clear. This is a solution-oriented, action-oriented event. There's nothing fuzzy about this, because kids are dying. Kids are committing suicide as young as 10 years old because they're figuring they have no reason to live. And that's on us as adults. So I want us to understand it will stretch our thinking, will stretch our comfort zones. But we are in this together. There is a safe place to learn and grow. We're not doing any blaming. There's no need to do so, because we're here for solutions. So does anyone have any questions? Would you mind, sir?
Absolutely.
All right, he came in all the plane and train and everything else.
I'm here, and I can't wait to hear from the panel. And then as well, I will say this, you know, one of the things that becomes, I think, most difficult to do is to understand, because I know that there are a lot of conversations, where are our parents, black and brown parents, in the process? I would encourage you to, as we think about ways today to brainstorm, to bring and engage parents, that we got parents that work 2 and 3 jobs.
Yes, some just had a call today, so they got called in, so that's right.
And they cannot, they have the challenges of life upon them. And we got to figure out ways to create, make it easier, create opportunities to take these experiences to them. Too often we plan and we think they need to come to us. I'm glad this community college opens itself up today to make it a convenient place for our students. So I hope that we will talk about convenient ways to engage our parents.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Shumate?
Yes, just based on your experience and even what you're doing in Oklahoma, have you seen any state boards that have a seat specific for a parental representative on that board? I know that's something that we talked about in Connecticut, and it was initially met with a lot of opposition. So have you seen any states that have said we want one of our seats designated for a parent?
I have not, and one of the challenges from a policy perspective in my state and some other states, especially when you talk about state boards, they're constitutionally drafted boards. And so to change the state constitution is significantly more difficult in Oklahoma than it may be for some other states that maybe have a statutory composition or may just take a form of legislation. But school boards definitely should look, I think that's a worthy thing to look at, is to encourage school boards to think about designating a position for parents. And how you do that is you push people like me, former legislators, to create those opportunities in a statutory way. I don't know as well, too, our state has an initiative petition. I think that's a wonderful, we can actually change our constitution, we just have to do it through essentially a drive, a petition drive of the people, of the public, to put an initiative on the ballot, and then we can change our state constitution that way. I would really hope we could look at Connecticut and see some ways.
I think statutorily, I think ours is statutory, so we're not talking about constitution.
So we may be able to do, and I think that is vitally important, because half the people that serve on these boards, especially you look at your school board and you poll. I wrote the charter school law for our state, and folks said, oh, you're going to siphon away money from public education, and this isn't public education. And all the folks, I would ask them very quickly, where do your kids go to school? Where do your grandkids go to school? You know what the answer was? They didn't have grandkids or kids in the school system. But they're making a decision.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Bernard Thomas from the Harvard Knights organization.
Are you surprised that you are not seeing more class action lawsuits against the Board of Ed and the school system, especially where they hold parents for educational neglect, and in rights they're doing the same thing?
I am actually quite shocked. Right. But I mean, again, I think a greater challenge for those usually in that system who are trapped in the lowest and most, I mean, there's obviously an understanding that the students who are trapped in failing schools are probably their parents can't afford and don't have the means and resources to bring those kinds of lawsuits. And the state, unfortunately, has an opportunity and upper hand to weigh them out. I've always been an advocate of that, but I think one of the quickest ways, when you look at it, to make a difference against the Board of Education is to get parents elected to that board and mobilize and get them on that board. That's probably the easiest and cheapest way to bring them out of the form.
So I was talking to some parents to ask them why they felt uncomfortable speaking up, advocating for their children, and they mentioned that they were afraid it was going to draw attention to themselves, and that DCF might get involved. The school might call DCF, which is our Division of Child and Family Services, which was shocking to me that would be their fear, that their kids would be, taken from them, or they would have some kind of punitive action taken against them. So I'm wondering, is there, the policies to sort of get involved in that area. I haven't been able to wrap my head around how to sort of solve that problem. I mean, you have to make parents feel safe to come forward and speak, and that there won't be some punitive action taken against them if they do.
And that's where I think organizations like this one is very important. A lot of times those parents are put in places of fear because I've actually seen school districts arrest a parent on site, so that in the middle of the morning breakfast time, so all the students could see it, to make sure that they told their parents, don't come up here. So we really have to be too, where we are, advocates to empower their parent. When I was in the legislature, I hosted sessions where I, explained to people their rights and explained to people as well the things that can and cannot happen. And I think that we all have a responsibility in this room as well to, when a parent comes to you, that's not the case. This is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. And most parents, I bet this parent will tell you, most parents, if they're given the instructions, they want to be advocates for their kids. They just don't know how.
Thank you so much. So we're going to transition into the board. I see you, Athena. And so I'm going to allow these two questions because it's filmed, and that way we can capture it. So I'm sorry, Athena, and then the young man.
This is more of a comment. One of the things that I find disheartening is, you specified people need to really try and serve on boards, and I agree with that. However, when we get people that look like us on these boards and we elect them to these positions, once they get on those boards, the agenda becomes something else. It's not the kids first. They have to fall in line with the politics of that board. And oftentimes, if you find that one that looks like us on the board, that is outspoken and truly advocating and putting the kids first, their time would be very limited on that board. That's right. That's a problem, starting with the board.
But that's on us, though, right? Because when we see the attacks coming.
Well, and also, too, I didn't get a chance, I didn't want to go too far into it. When you got a person that you put on the board, you can't just put them on the board. Then you got to have folks who show them how to build alliances on that board. See, what I did as a black person in Oklahoma, one of only 4 African Americans in the legislature, I found places, I took on the model, I don't have any permanent friends, any permanent enemies, I only have permanent interests. And you find those areas, so I'll give you an example. My area was the lowest funded area for education with a feeder pattern of failing schools, a feeder pattern. Jim Bob in Broken Bow had the same situation. There was more Jim Bobs than there were Jabar Shumates. So I built alliances with Jim Bobs in those rural areas. And then we challenge policies. So you got to give support systems to people who get elected to help them. A lot of times, you know, what happens is, yeah, we get co-opted because we're alone. But if we still feel the presence of the community behind us, helping us mobilize and build a strategy, I think you have more success out of the folks that you put there. Because it's isolating to be.
Yes, it is.
I've been in a state council. It's very isolating. So you got to make sure that you give that person the support and help them build the right kinds of strategies.
Thank you. Last question.
Yeah, just a quick comment. You mentioned choice, opportunities. And I'm here, I represent Covenant Preparatory School. We're a tuition-free private school for middle school boys in Hartford. We're a tuition-free private school. We're not state funded. And there are about 45 other schools across the country that are similar to ours. And the reason I say that is because I'm the head of school, I've been head of school, I left a corporate career to run the school. This is my 4th year in this role. And I say that because in the 4 years I've been there, we should have a waiting list of kids coming to our school. I have not seen that. We are small schools, 60 students. We're 60 students, small schools. We are private, so we are selective in terms of our schools. We're not cherry picking, but we're finding the right kids who are motivated and the right fit for our school. So I say that to say, we also have other options. We you know, that in ways in which we can find solutions for our kids to go on to the best high schools and best colleges as well. So I just want to lay that out, that we also have, there are other options out there, and folks can look for those options. There's 45 schools, similar to us, across the country. That are doing the same model, tuition-free private school and getting kids in.
Not only that, they can take your strategies that work, if they work for our children. If they can't get there, then hold this brother up and the strategies and successes that are working and demand those to be in the areas of the school system. That's the role of really engaging your policymakers. Bring to their attention, did you know? And when the system turns its ear and says, we don't want to hear that, that's when you go and say, okay, well then we'll create other options. So my experience was, I went to a charter school started by a sister very similar to the Marva Collins experience, where she had the kids that nobody could learn and teach, and they had discipline problems. And she built the most successful elementary school in the state with the highest performing scores in the state, with 97% of them being black children. And so I said, this is the special sauce. And if you're not gonna help us create the special sauce, then we'll create our own. And I think that that's vitally important. And then as well, I'm a big believer that all kids don't learn the same way. So options just need to exist. I go back to saying, the University of Oklahoma is a good school because it does have the University of Texas near it. And as long as the University of Texas is near it, we're going to be doing everything that we can to raise more money and do greater things. And we'll get them, I don't care if it's as shameless as being in the national playoffs. Whatever it does to attract students to the University of Oklahoma, we're going to work to get that attention. And I think that competition does create a situation where, I'm a firm believer, I will always tell you, the public education system exists to educate our kids. That's right. I never will walk away from that. But I will say this, it needs help. You're the help.
Thank you so much, sir. All right, let's give another round of applause. Thank you so much. I have to let the time go, y'all. I have to get all the questions because we're capturing a moment in time to improve the lives of our children. And again, we might feel uncomfortable, you might want to squirm in your seat, you understand? But we are in this together. I think I want to re-emphasize that, and I'm going to continue to re-emphasize that. You know, we have State Department of Education in the room, we got grandparents, you know, we have online media, we have people that travel. So this is about all of us. And just so you know, so thank you for the shout outs, but I'm not doing this alone. I have Athena Wagner, our outreach coordinator. I have Michelle Muhammad out of Hartford. So when I call people, understand, because we in this together, I believe in team firmly, and I am a mom. And I banned my children from coming here today. I use my mama authority, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to lead by example. We have to mean what we say and say what we mean. Right. And that's what this is today. So as we transition into the panel, I'm going to call them up. I just want to give you some logistics. As a parent leader, I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to travel across the country. I see City Councilor Arjo Wentz just joining us from Hartford. She wasn't the only one that had a frozen battery, so did Stan. So just know people, again, I thank everyone for their time sacrifice. The one benefit of being, the benefit of being a parent leader that's hungry for change. I'm hungry, I got babies. I lost a baby last year. He was 24 in a fatal car accident, so my world changed for me last year. I mean, it changed. So I became laser focused on helping families because we only have this one life. And either our children are gonna grow up hating us for knowing things are not good for them and putting them in those situations, or they'll never forget that their mom and their dad and their grandpa and their role models in their lives did everything they could to get a fair chance at life. I want us to be very clear. I didn't say life was fair, but it's our job to make sure they have a fair chance at it. I'm not here for you to like me because you don't have to like me. In the beginning as a parent leader, I wanted people to like me. When people were angry with me for fighting, I went home crying. I didn't know what to do because people didn't like me. But when God helped me focus this thing, and it's all about the children, I was okay. And when I became okay, I demanded respect and started to get respect. You understand? There is this evolution that has occurred with me. So I will say, so while you're hearing Gwen Samuel as the founder, make no mistake about it. I'm here because of great champions across the state of Connecticut who lifted me up in prayer. I'm learning how to pass the baton. This is not about headlines, because again, our babies are dying. And that's not a figurative statement, that's a literal statement. So I got a chance to meet people across the country. You know, I met Sister Teresa here, the vice chair, the former vice chair of the State Board of Education. This is a sister you need to get to know. She was on the front lines. Some of these violations that were happening in these schools, things that should happen to no child. Let me be very clear, things that are happening in some of our schools. I'm not going to say all. The norm of the day is we will not generalize. We're quick to say all parents, all teachers, all schools, all blacks, all Latino. We need to move away from generalizing. But I asked her to be on this panel because number one, she was a state board education. She's also an attorney, and she works in the business sector, and she fights for us. And you know how the state rewarded her for fighting for us? She wasn't reappointed back to the state board. That's the politics that's happening. And that's a serious thing because sometimes she was the only one. Sister Charlene, who you see over here in the audience, she's from the State Department of Ed. I didn't send her the questions on me, so she's going to observe today. But I appreciate her to take the risk because I know parents who live in certain cities and communities who can't call on their leadership to show up to anything. You can't even get through on the phone. So I appreciate you, Sister Charlene, and many of the State Board of Education who see me as an ally, and that all of me will always agree. Sharif, I met this brother from Philadelphia. He runs a charter school, a majority black kids, but he also was appointed, he was honored by former President Obama. For some, he's still our president. But I will say, even though I don't agree with everything our presidents say, I've learned to respect offices. You understand? So we ain't always gonna have to agree, but I respect offices. And I hope that my leadership and your leadership can change the minds of people who don't mean us no harm. But I refuse to live in this world being hate-filled. I refuse, because our babies are dying. And we have to own that space. I asked him to come. We had funding. He said, I will be there. He organized black male educators from across this country. Over 500 black male educators, but yet they make up 2% of the nation's teachers. Even though the research says if you get one person of color, our babies do better. But Connecticut has over 95% of non-minority. And don't get it twisted, don't think we don't have good white folks. So don't even mistake that to mean that. But what I'm saying, if the research says by having them in the classroom, our kids do better. And there are best practices across this country. So I'm asking us to listen, to open your minds and hearts. Take in the best practices. Let's document this thing and make this happen for our babies. And then people who will watch this across the country, because trust me, across the country watches me. And that's okay. Because when it comes to our babies, I am unapologetic, I don't negotiate, and I have no time for foolishness. And after losing a child, I definitely don't have no time for foolishness. You understand? Because unless you lost something in this world, then you won't know how it feels. But these are all our babies. I love my babies enough to keep them at home and not bring them here when they don't act right. I am consistent. My expectations are clear. And if we're going to improve the lives of children, we need to be clear with each other and with our babies. Albert Shank, I just met this young man from Harvard just last month, y'all. I love this research. He was a researcher. They don't never put parents in the room with researchers. For some reason, they think for some reason the color of my skin equals that we are illiterate. They're not interchangeable. And make no mistake about it, I am not illiterate. Now, you can think I am and pass your secret documents across my desk as I'm reading them. And then as I read them, I will be sharing them. So don't keep misunderstanding the color of the skin to equal something else. I met him, he talked about non-cognitive skills, so I said, can you join us? My state could benefit. Did I say my state wasn't a great state? That's not what I said to him, because we got great people in here. But we are struggling with some issues that we need to address. Miss Rebecca, she's the dean of Relay Connecticut. These are educators. I remember them being attacked. They were majority black women being attacked at the state capitol who said I wanted to come to the state capitol to bring non-traditional teaching styles, to bring more teachers of color to the state of Connecticut. And the state of Connecticut came after this group of young women. They got degrees, they're educators. And we can't set barriers of such things. We don't even want diverse teachers. But guess what? They mess with the wrong people. But I did say to her, next time you want to come, see about the community, come see the community. But we had that conversation. And we here, and we good. We all have to learn to communicate with one another. Brother Bernard, he runs an after-school program in Hartford. He deals with the children that we expel every day. And he has to fight for every single nickel. We will fund every traditional program that don't serve our babies, but those who are taking the risk, who are out there, we for some reason can't find the funding. Well, guess what? You're going to keep messing with us, you won't find our babies in your schools either. Don't get it twisted. Miss Athena, we butt heads every day. But that's what makes us a team. She is very clear. Don't start nothing with our babies. There will be nothing with our babies. She said, Gwen, you're doing kumbaya, that ain't gonna work today. I said, well, can we figure it out? She get on me. But she's unapologetic and I appreciate her. So even though you're hearing Gwen Samuel, just know I'm not doing this alone, and you know no one person can do this. Sister Michelle and them, I didn't even call them to say they knew the information was coming. My volunteers didn't show up. They called me first minute. We here. We got you. We didn't even communicate. For those who believe in God, that's God. And then I appreciate my sister who I just met last month because of Miss Charlene. She handles all the school counselors in the state of Connecticut. And when I learned that we had 1,400 school counselors and only 76 of them are any color, out of 1,400, 76 of any color exist. We can do better, especially when dealing with the mental health. So as I transition from that, I'm sorry I had to give y'all that because I wanted to put context to here. We are in this. Millie Arseniegas, you need to be up here. She's the founder and the president of the Harvard Parent University. She's going to bring the Latino voice here today because, again, we lost some snow, and it was her birthday a couple of days ago, so that's why she gets a little straggling moment. Called her on the camera, but you can join us up here. Oh, you were behind me, my brother. And this is my data expert, Mr. Tyrone. I only met him last year. Everyone I just met y'all, but I like to learn from folk. And so I appreciate him coming from Massachusetts. And so I invited us so that we can hear from other perspectives. And then we'll all have the opportunity. We're small enough and intimate enough that we all will be sharing. So this is not expert versus someone else. We are all experts in the lane that God has put us in.
That's right.
Right? But these are ones I invited very particularly for a particular content. And then we will share that and bring it all together. So I'd like to, as I give the mic to our moderator, I just want you to know, this is Doug Harding, who was like, I'm nervous about this, Gwen. I don't know what to do with this. So can we give him a round of applause for taking the risk? Because if we're going to approve the lives of our children, we would have to take risk. So, yes, we can have it. So as we're going to take a 1 minute and a break. On your tables, you have something called the river babies. The stories of the river babies. So I'm asking everyone to read it. And then the first question from the moderator will be reflection on this, and then the moderator will go from there. So this will help us with context of what's to come in the conversation. So I'll give you a minute. It's a very short thing, like a minute to read it, and then we'll transition into it.
My name is Doug Hardy. I'm a Connecticut Parents Union. My wife and I run the site for 12 years, and most of you probably know my wife. It's Christine Stewart. We're not coming at, I didn't come here just because I was a member of the media. My wife and I both worked at OPP in Hartford for several years. I was what was called a youth development specialist. And we helped prepare kids for work and taught life skills. And it was a life-changing experience for both of us. Just for context, so we're not coming at this entirely as a news organization. We care about this. Anyway, the story of the river babies. I think a lot of folks in this room are the people who are going upstream to solve the problem. So maybe we can just start, we can grab the microphone and work our way down the table.
Yeah, we had two mics, and I just realized that this one wasn't working, so we were mic short. Is that okay? Let us know how it's working out. We can adjust accordingly.
So why don't you go ahead and say your name one more time and tell us what you think of this short piece.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? My name is Tyrone Moa, and I'm the managing director of my own small little consulting firm called Ed Inquiry, which is trying to help schools turn themselves around across the country. The story of the river babies, I think, is very relevant to the conversation that we're having here today and the conversation that's being had across really the country at this point in time. There are systemic issues that have to be addressed and have to be focused on to stem the tide of the crisis that's occurring in the Black community. These systemic issues, although parents need to be at the table, you need other leaders at that table as well. Parents are not going to be able to do it alone, as well as educators not able to do it alone. But the systemic issues that are creating this pipeline, not just from school to prison, but from cradle to prison, is something that if there is not a real revolutionary change, the crisis of future generations of our people is just too difficult to mention. Sitting at this table, I was able to meet some people who are not about incremental change, but are more about that systemic change that's needed. And I'm going to be really interested in hearing from them as well.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So let me clear up the question, right? So I would like us to reflecting on the reading. So what are your things? I just want to make sure we're clear. All right, thank you.
Good morning, Teresa Hopkins Staten. Three things came to mind. The word village in the story is very important because it's going to take every single person in this room and around these tables to be a part of the transition and change that we want to see in the state of Connecticut for our children. The other thing that and I've heard this story read in various contexts, the other thing that kind of jumped out to me is the sense of urgency around saving these babies and the lack thereof when it comes to the perils and the disparities that we see in our own school systems, in our school districts. There certainly needs to be that same sense of urgency and care demonstrated when it comes to some of the suspension and expulsion and inadequate educational environments that our children are being subject to today. And the other thing is the cry. They talk about or reference a baby cry. They didn't talk about a Black baby's cry or a Latino baby's cry or a white baby's cry. It was a baby's cry. There was no color or anything to tell you where they came from, whether they were from West Hartford, Bridgeport, Waterbury. And we need to start looking through a lens of neutrality when it comes to educating our children, see their potential, not the fact that they are their ethnicity or the demographics of where they come from. And if we start looking at all of our children through that lens, I think we'll be able to do a lot more for them in their future.
Good morning. Thanks again, Mama Gwen, as I always call her. Three things came to my mind as I read this story. Again, one is around organizing and how important that is in order to move. You know, that African proverb, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And them organizing around the idea of what to do next. I think too often in education, just like any other places, we start talking about, they could have saved the first baby and then just written 50 stories about this individualized success, right? We all know about this one kid who someone helped and supported and pulled out of the river, and now they have this successful story, and forgetting all about the institutional, the depth of the institutional racism and oppression that's undergirded this whole thing, because we're mesmerized by this one story. But if it's not going to scale, then it's not working. So that's the second piece. The other one is like the difference between equity and justice. Pulling that kid out of the river is equity. The two who ran up the river to stop the kids being thrown in the river and put it in harm's way from the, as we used to say, from the giddy up, that's justice. And I think often we're spending 99% of our time chasing equity, which is important. Doesn't mean that it's not important work, it is. But justice is where the true fight actually is, and that's what will be the long-lasting impact. So the dismantling of the unjust structures that continuously drown our youth and our communities is what has to take more of our attention, more of our effort, and more of our fight.
Yes. Yes.
All right, morning. My name's Albert Chang again, and Gwen, thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and see you again. So I'm kind of a numbers guy, I guess doing school research. So I think I'll point out a number here. Just the number 2 there, I think that struck me. It just took 2 people to realize that there's this deeper problem. And they ran up, and then the rest of the town kind of realized, where y'all going? It just takes 2. You know, I think, and we got more than 2 people here, I think. And so, you know, my point here is that it doesn't take that much to seed an idea and to get other people, you know, excited and just passionate about doing something. And so, you know, it seems like we're up against this brick wall. You know, it's a big uphill climb at times. But it doesn't take that much in numbers, and we got a lot of numbers here. So, you know, I'm kind of encouraged to see that, you know, there's a lot possible even when just a few people get together.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Ms. Gwen. Rebecca Good. And when I look at this story, the 2 parts that come together is the community that was there to come together and take the babies out of the water, that strength in the community, to have that strength, and then the courage of the 2 that said, we're going to go upstream. I look at Connecticut and I say, we have strength in our communities. Our communities are not weak, we are strong. And yes, we also love the courage of those that are going to step outside the community and start fighting against the babies being thrown in. And we need both. We need that courage and the community, and together, then we can truly make the difference of the children not coming down the stream and helping those that did.
Good morning. And thanks, Gwen, once again for having me. So one thing comes to my mind. How long they've been throwing them babies in? Okay, I'm 58 years old. They still throwing them in. Nobody has even begun to run to the front. We have individuals who don't have the proper support to make sure that we can make a difference. Advocacy is huge. We need to get busy. We need to be out there voting. We need to be supporting council persons, representatives, senators. We need to be supporting the people that's supporting us. I'm 58 years old. They've been throwing them babies in as long as I've been living. And they are continuing to throw those babies in now. So when we look at our education, when we look at the lack of education that our kids are getting, especially in the urban community, it's sinful. They should be arrested. Mm-hmm. We have DCF, Department of Education, and Judicial. Those 3 do not work together. In order to start saving some lives, they must work together. Everybody on the island on their own, and the only thing that makes a difference to them is the money. And we need to stop them from getting access to the money because we are giving them permission to continue to do what they're doing to our babies. I know we don't like it, but we have to fight for our children. And this has been going on for generations.
Athena Wagner, the outreach coordinator for Connecticut Parents Union. And what I got from this story is a couple of things. The system is deliberately designed to do this. You know, someone mentioned take them out of the water. Well, I've been saying for a long time, and I agree that the bottom line is about the money. I've been saying for a long time, they're not gonna understand anything else until you take that money. And by taking that money, I mean a boycott, a school boycott. I am so serious about that. We have not begun to put that action into play yet. But I am very serious about a boycott because if you're not gonna give parents choices to adequately educate their children, school choice, if you're going to have a system designed that keeps them in these failing schools, then it's time to pull them out and pull that money. I bet you'll get their attention because that is their language. And the other thing is parents. We give them our children. I'm a parent advocate. But somebody had to give them permission to get them babies and throw them in the water. They can't do nothing without our permission. Parents, 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 you are key. Even though the system will tell you or try to convince you that you don't matter, that you're a non-factor, that you don't know anything, parents hold the key to the whole game. You're the game changer. So parents, stop giving your kids to baby killers.
First, I'd like to make a correction. As awesome as the title that Gwen gave me for over all these counselors, that is not my title. And it's fitting that I'm down at the end of the table. I work with Choice. I've done a lot of advocacy with the Choice program. And I work with Naugatuck Community College for the Gear Up program. Just recently, when I think of this story, and I said I wasn't going to get emotional, but the thing that stands out to me, again, is the two that ran forward. And I had to stop and think that this college gave me my opportunity, because I was one of those babies that was thrown in. And I had to leave Virginia State due to pregnancy and come here, and it allowed me to be in women in non-traditional jobs and to come through Capital, to come through Central. And it led me through the Project Concern to be in the Choice program. And so I've sat in the seat of that child, that baby. I've been in that water. I had somebody pull me out of that water. And to see those that run ahead, I've done a lot of work with parent advocacy. And to me, we've got to empower the parents to move forward. At the end of the day, as a parent and as a participant, the things that you encounter is not until you've been in that water and you understand what it's like and what you encounter, and when you arrive, to pull another parent forward and give them a voice that they can, in fact, overcome for their kids.
Ditto, everyone. My name is Millie Arciniega. I'm the executive director of the Hartford Parent University. And a couple things came to my mind is that I believe that parents are navigating, okay? When I see these babies, parents are really trying to navigate a broken system. And it feels sometimes like they're a hamster on a wheel. At least for me it does. When I was a parent, when I had my children in the public school system. And, you know, and everybody's seeing it. That's what I don't understand. Everybody knows. And it's like we're waiting for this, like, super man or woman to come in and save us. And so parents are starting to realize that there's no one that's coming to save them. There's no one, right? So, like, they're taking the matters in their own hands now. So I'm starting to see parents to homeschool their children. I'm starting to see parents to say, you know what, I may not have all the money now, but I'm certainly gonna try to put them in a private school. And when I see these two people to say, well, where are they coming from? Okay, where are they coming from? It reminds me of the state. Where are they coming from? Now, you know damn well we know where they're coming from. And we're so blind at that as a state. We're so blind to see that our children are struggling in this broken system. It's time to change it. It's time to change it, or parents are really realizing that they can do much more, which is crazy to me. Much more, because they have no funding, right? They're relying on this broken system, but they're starting to realize that they can do much more on their own.
Okay, so we've had a lot of different ideas there. Today is about solutions, right? So I'm going to try and focus this next piece on that. So maybe folks here could tell us, and I guess in the context of the disparity in disciplinary action. Okay, let's think of that first, because we have people of color, students of color, who are being suspended and expelled at an inordinate rate. So let's try and address that. You know, maybe you could tell us down the line.
So as I transition out, I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional. The reason why I'm getting it out the way now is because I will be a student with you. Because every day is a day of learning. This is a classroom. Life is a classroom. And this classroom ain't treating us too well. But I will say this, they do to us what we allow. Because you don't see suburban communities saying these same things. You better believe if a suburban mom thought you were thinking about dragging their baby, you won't have a job. And that's just thinking it. If I think you're not looking right at my baby, you're not gonna have a job. But for us, they are saying we assault you, we hurt you, but you better have your baby back in our class on Monday.